Hi everyone, welcome back. Today we are going to do my September wrap-up. So I finished 3 books in September and I'm currently reading 3 more books. So let's talk about them. The first book I finished, finally, is A Beautifully Foolish Endeavor by Hank Green. If you caught any of my previous videos, you'll know that I have been trying to finish this book for a long time, and I was a little ways into it and then I paused my reading of it so I could read Midnight Sun. If you're interested in my thoughts on Midnight Sun, go ahead and check my last wrap up because I talk a lot about it. But this month I finally got back to A Beautifully Foolish Endeavor and it was kind of disappointing, to be honest. When I jumped back into it, something really exciting happened like the next chapter and I was super into it for a long time and it felt like the plot was finally going and all the threads were going to come together, but I ended up not really liking the direction it went. So this is a sequel to An Absolutely Remarkable Thing, which Hank Green came out with last year. And when An Absolutely Remarkable Thing came out, it was kind of marketed as a standalone. And then people were kind of like surprised and maybe even a little upset that it wasn't a standalone. It was actually a duology. So this book finishes that story and it does answer a lot of the questions that the first book left us with, but I didn't really like the answers to those questions, unfortunately. I don't know, it really sapped all the magic out of it and mystery. And that was part of the reason why I loved the first book. It felt like this book was heavily inspired by both Transformers and Ready Player One. Definitely Ready Player One. The book itself even mentions what is happening is similar to Transformers, and so at that point you would think they would probably try to differentiate it, but yeah, it was very, very similar to Ready Player One, or at least the new conflicts that come up into this book. The main antagonist is the same antagonist from the first book, but it seems like he's a completely different character. Like, he doesn't act the same, and I don't think that, for me, it didn't seem logical that the guy that we knew from the first book would become who he is in this book. And maybe that's Hank Green trying to make a point about what individual people are capable of. But to me, it just seemed like it should have been a different character. And in this book, all of the side characters from the first book get their own narration, except for Robin, who is, like, I felt that in the first book, Robin was a bigger character than Miranda, but he's really not in this book almost at all. He's like in maybe 2 chapters, and I felt like Robin is a really good character and he deserved his own storyline in this and he didn't get it, so that was a little disappointing. And then Miranda starts off with a lot of narration, but then her storyline kind of goes silent for a little while, and I was most interested in Miranda's storyline, so that kind of really slowed down the book for me. And also, like, the first book in this duology, a lot of things happen that are kind of absurd, but it still seems to fit within the book. Like in the first book, grape jelly is a thing that happens, and I don't want to say more than that because it can be a spoiler, but if you've read the book, you know what I'm talking about. And like, grape jelly is completely a random thing, but when you read the first book, it still makes sense with the story. Like, it doesn't pull you out of the story. But this book, a lot of just absurd and completely random things happen, and it just felt so chaotic and didn't really make sense, and it really broke my suspension of disbelief and pulled me out of the story a lot. So it didn't feel as refined to me as the first book. I didn't like the answers to the questions. I felt like it was too much Ready Player One. Robin was completely missing. The characters became characters that I don't know if I totally agree with the way they developed, and so it was kind of a letdown for me, unfortunately, and I ended up giving it 2.5 stars. So the second book I finished was Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno-Garcia, and This was totally a mood setter for autumn and it really like got me into that spooky autumn mood, and I was totally looking forward to reading this and had a really good time with it. If you're into like Gothic haunted house stories, then you'll probably like this one. It reminded me a lot of The Haunting of Hill House book because I haven't seen the Netflix show yet, and also Crimson Peak with a little bit of Get Out in it too, and also Mother. So like if you combine all of those stories, you kind of get this story. And I really, really loved the first half of it. I read the first half. Well, I listened to it on audiobook and I could not stop listening to it. So I got through the first half in like a day, which is super fast for me. But then I didn't really love the second half, which seems to be a trend with the way I enjoy books. But I'm kind of like that with all horror stories, though, where I really love the beginning, where it sets up the environment and the setting, and you get like all this spooky haunted house things where strange things start happening. But whenever we start getting answers to why those strange things are happening, I tend to not like the story as much. So it's probably just me. If you're into stories like that, this is a really good one. Plus it's set in Mexico, which I don't read a lot of stories in that setting, so that was a really cool change of pace for me. And it was good. Me personally, the last half kind of lost its luster a little bit. So I ended up giving it 3.5 stars, and I rounded down to 3 on Goodreads, but I could probably round up to 4 because the first half I did really, really like. Okay, and the last book I finished was Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. I finally read this book. It came out several years ago. It is one of the most loved books in my little circle on Goodreads. Pretty much everyone I'm friends with on Goodreads has given this 5 stars. It's a pretty big deal. And a few months ago, I had a poll on my Instagram on what ebook on my Kindle I should read, and Six of Crow won. From like 30 books, Six of Crow was the winner. And so I read it. I actually read most of it on audiobook because I also own the audiobook, and that's just the quickest way for me to get through books. And the audiobook was surprisingly good. This book has 6 different perspectives in it, and the audiobook has different voice actors for each one. And the one for Inej was fantastic. She just did a fantastic job. And like the way that she made the words come alive, it was so lyrical and just like pleasant, but also a little unsettling in a way, because she had this like feline, almost darkness to her, and was a little sultry, but also like a little mysterious, and somehow you still really love her. Like all of the characters in the book love her. So I really like that voice actress. I think she did an amazing job and really made the writing come alive. It made me appreciate Leigh Bardugo's writing in this even more. Hearing the words spoken, like there were parts of it that just sounded like poetry, the way that they were spoken and the syllables came together. So I really, really appreciated that. Really nice to listen to, especially Inej's chapters. Kaz's narrator, while I think it was probably true to Kaz's like husky voice, it wasn't as pleasant to listen to, so just fair warning on that. But I really understand why people love this book. I think objectively, it is a really well-written YA. It's like a heist story. You don't necessarily have to read the original Grisha trilogy first. It doesn't have as much magic in it as the original Grisha trilogy. The characters really grew on me. It's definitely a character-driven story. And the plot, a lot of things happen. But for some reason, like, so many things happen that it was boring in a way. Like, I couldn't follow the plot because it had so much movement in it. It was really hard for me to follow the plot, and I ended up being bored because of that. But I did really love the characters. I think Jesper and Wylan might be my favorite. I really enjoyed them. But also Inez, you know, she was great too. But personally, this type of story, the whole heist thing, it's really not for me. It's not a plot or a story that I'm really interested in. And so while I acknowledge that it was a really well-written book, it wasn't really always enjoyable for me. And so I ended up giving it 3.5 stars. Totally understand why other people rate it higher, but since the plot was kind of boring and I just didn't really enjoy all of it, that's why my rating was a little bit lower. Will I read the sequel? I'm not sure. I own the physical copy of Crooked Kingdom, and so I might pick it up, but it's not top priority for me. There are definitely other books on my TBR that I think that I will enjoy more and that I'm looking forward to more. But I am glad that I finally read this, and it is a pretty big book, so I feel good that I was able to finish this in a month. Okay, so some other books that I started reading in September but did not finish. The Shadow of Kiyoshi by F.C. Yi. This is the sequel to The Rise of Kyoshi. And I'm going through it really slowly. Actually, I'm really not that far into it. I'm like maybe 50 pages. Yeah. So I've been ingesting a lot of Avatar content lately, so I'm trying to take my time with it and not get burnt out, not try to rush my way through this because I think this is the last Kyoshi book. So I just want to enjoy it and go slowly and really like soak up all the scenes and characters and content and not feel like I have to read it as quickly as possible. That said, I do definitely want to finish this before November. NaNoWriMo happens in November, and I really want to write an Avatar-related fanfiction in November, and so I'm trying to get as up to date on all of the canon as I can before then. So I'm hoping to finish this in October. And along those same lines, I started reading the Imbalance graphic novel. Of all of the Avatar graphic novel library editions, this is the newest one that just came out earlier this year, in September, August or September, I don't really know. And I have read the first part of it, and so I'm rereading the first part, but I haven't read parts 2 or 3 yet. So I'm really looking forward to finishing this that I started a long time ago, so that'll be a lot of fun. The other book I've been reading is Pet Sematary by Stephen King. I've been wanting to read this for a long time. I know nothing about it, so I'm about a third of the way in right now, and I'm really enjoying it. The cat just came back. I think that things are going to be picking up soon. The other book I want to get to in October is Rebecca by Daphne du... I don't remember how to pronounce her last name. It's actually right here. I have a really old copy that I found at a used bookstore, and I really like it. So I don't know how to pronounce her last name. Daphne du Maurier? Maurier. But I'm really looking forward to reading this in October as well. Let me know if you have read it. Yeah, don't spoil it for me because I don't know anything about it. Okay, I'm sorry I have to wrap this up really quickly because my battery's about to die, but let me know what your favorite book in September was and if you have read and or enjoyed any of the books I mentioned. I hope you all have a fantastic October. October is like one of my favorite months. Okay, thanks for watching. Bye! Rex is taking a bath, so if you hear licking, it's my dog. Today we are going to do my, what month is it? They were all new reads for me, which is pretty good because I tend to supplement my reading with rereads. This is not important. Emily, you don't have to say this. So I didn't feel like it was as... Are you done? It's okay. Get Out isn't really a haunted house story. Why are you blinking at me? What is that about? Is that my battery? And thank you. Okay, I have to see what this blinking light is. What are you? If my battery dies, I'm sorry. I have 3 different batteries and they are all dead right now, so sorry. But let me know what your favorite book in October was, and thank you for watching. I hope you all have. Did I say October?